Hello, lovely booktubers. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Debs, and this is Raina Reads Stuff. I am here in the book shack. I have got the lights on, but it is still light outside, and it is almost 5:15. Today is Sunday, therefore today is let's do my reading wrap up for the week. And this week I've done quite well. I've had a good reading week. I have read 7 books. Some for specific things and some just because I fancied it. So, those of you who have been here before may know that I've set myself some personal challenges this year, one of which is to discover why Nottingham, which is where I live, in the East Midlands in the UK, is one of the 53 UNESCO Cities of Literature. And I plan to do that by reading lots of authors who are based or have been based at some point in Nottingham. And my first completed read of this week was Lonely Hearts by John Harvey. John Harvey is a crime writer and a poet. I actually met him a couple of years ago when he launched a book of poetry in the city. Yeah, it must have been, I can't remember how long ago it is, but he was a lovely man. This, Lonely Hearts, is the first in his series of D.I. Charlie Resnick novels, arguably his most famous protagonist. I like Charlie Resnick. He's a grumpy old git. He has lots of cats. He likes jazz. He is Polish in origin. Um, and these are based in Nottingham. This one, like I say, was the first in the series, and it was written in 1989. We have at least another 10 Resnick novels. He's also written some short stories. 2, 4, 6, there's 8 other crime novels. This was listed in I think it was the Times top 100 detective novels ever written. And it's a good introduction. I like the fact that it's based in Nottingham because I can quiz my husband about whether or not he remembers the pubs that are in here and the shops that are in here. I've only been living here for 5 years, so I don't remember 1989, but I know what some of these things have turned into. And I always enjoy walking streets in a novel that I actually know. So, a woman is found dead. She's been sexually assaulted. Police believe that it may well be her ex, who has been very vocal in stalking and shouting and things. But he has an alibi. And it's an alibi that is backed up by 2 other criminals who say he was casing somewhere else in order to burgle it while the murder happened. And then another woman is found dead and sexually assaulted, and it doesn't look like there is any link between them at all. And the team have to figure out what's happened. The MOs are completely different. The women don't know each other. They seem to have no connection whatsoever. And it's up to Charlie Resnick and his team to solve this crime. Loved it. I love these. They're great. And like I say, it gives me a walk around Nottingham in the late 1980s. This one, actually, it's one of those series. There were 8, maybe, novels, pretty much one after the other. And then there was quite a long period of time, and then the series started up again. So I don't know whether I have all of them. I certainly have more of them. I definitely have the next one. I might read that soon. Who knows? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I like his atmosphere. I like police procedurals. That's a good one. Second read of the week, On the Banks of Plum Creek, Laurie Ingalls Wilder. This is the third of 7 in the Little House on the Prairie stories. I read, I don't know if I read them all. I certainly read this one and past this one when I was a kid. Um, one of the things I like about them is the descriptions of the landscape, which I find absolutely lovely. And in this one, the Ingalls family trek off from their house on the prairie to the banks of Plum Creek, and initially they're living in a dugout on the banks that they acquire, and then Pa builds a house, as Pa does. Um, Bit nostalgia for me, really, and also I actually think that for kids they're a good study in social history. They're a good introduction to social history. The things the girls have to do, very, very different from the things that 8, 9, 10-year-old girls would be doing now. Um, yeah, quite a joy, really. Um, like I say, the descriptions of the flora and fauna are really what does it for me, um, and the differences in the ways of life of children then and children today. Now, this is an interesting one. The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. I read a book maybe last year, perhaps the year before, called The Appeal by Janice Hallett, and loved it. And it was all written in emails. Were there texts? There might have been texts in there as well. When I came to the end of it, having thoroughly enjoyed it and thought it was quite clever, I thought, I wonder what she's going to do next, because she can't do the same thing again. Well, this one, this starts with a letter from a police inspector to a lecturer in maths at a university. And the police have found a phone and some encrypted messages, lots and lots of encrypted recordings on there, which they have fed through a computer system that is called Decipher It. And what they're sending to said maths tutor, maths lecturer, are the transcripts that have come out of this Decipher It computer. And they are all the transcripts of the audio files found on this phone. Now, what it appears to be is a guy called Steve Smith, who was a career criminal and has recently come out of jail after serving an 11-year sentence for murder. And he is recording the messages. He has recorded the messages on this phone. He has turned over a new leaf. he has learnt to read because he was illiterate, and he has discovered that he has a son that he didn't know he had and wants to be in contact with him. But most of all, he wants to decipher the Twyford Code. And this starts with him as a child. He's in a remedial English group. He finds a book on a bus that is written by Edith Twyford, who was a children's author who nobody rates anymore because she tends to be sexist, racist, all sorts of things that are not, make her not suitable for inclusion in children's in schools and things. Anyway, he finds this book, he gives it to his teacher, and she is absolutely fascinated by this book and says there's a code in there. Now, he's in a remedial English class which includes a couple of other lads and a couple of girls. There are 5 or 6 of them. Nathan, Paul. I think there's 5 of them in total. So there's Steve and Nathan and Paul, and then there's Shell and Donna. And their teacher takes them down to the home of Edith Twyford to have a look around. Then she takes them to this airstrip and she disappears. 40 years later, Steve wants to discover what's happened to her. And he ropes in his old friends to try and figure it out. Now, the writing in this book, you have to imagine that it has been put through a computer program which is translating audio files. And it doesn't necessarily translate the audio files well. So, for the first chapter or so, I'm wondering why he's talking about missiles. Missiles frequently pops up. And then you realise that it's not missiles, it's Miss Isles, who was the teacher of the remedial English group. All the way through it, it talks about mustard. That is what the deciphering program has decided that must have or must any of the starting with must, because of his accent, he's a Londoner, is translated as mustard. They go to Bournemouth, but he says Bournemouth, so it comes out as boar moth or boar mouth or all sorts of other connotations. So you have to be on your toes when you're reading it to pick up the misinterpretations of the deciphering software. The plot gets more and more convoluted and more complicated, and the ending isn't anywhere close to what I expected it to be. I liked the premise of the book. I loved the fact that things were spelt incorrectly because it was a computer deciphering a human accent. But the plot got too complicated. It just got too ridiculous, I think. Whereas it says on here, not to be missed, every page is a joy, even better than the appeal, says the Guardian. I'd sort of argue with that. I think I preferred the appeal. Not saying this wasn't good, but I was really enjoying it until we got to the end. Right, next up. MJ over at Reading This Life is doing 24 in 24. This is an event that she's running all year, and the aim is to read 24 banned or challenged books in 2024. So, I read 2 last month. What were they? Oh, 1984 by George Orwell and Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. First one for this month, Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. Now, this was published in 1939. It was banned temporarily after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and the author and his publishers chose not to reprint it until the 1960s. This is a very hard-hitting anti-war book. And in this book, our protagonist, Joe, wakes up, doesn't know where he is, and gradually realizes that he's in a hospital. And he has been very, very seriously wounded in a bombardment in France in the First World War. You don't actually know where he is in hospital, but he has a gradual awakening, and he flits between the past and the present as he drops in and out of consciousness, and it takes a while for him to realize just how badly he has been injured. And he's so badly injured that the majority of people would have been dead. He can't understand why he isn't dead. And he's lost any way of communicating with people. And this is his story. It's a story of him realizing what is left of him and becoming desperate to let people know that despite the fact that his body is completely mangled, his mind is still intact and he's trapped. It's a really harrowing book. One of the most harrowing First World War books I've read. It's brilliantly written. It's very, very, very anti-war. And I think it's the sort of book that people ought to read because it's such a poignant and important book. I love that. I know it's weird, isn't it, to say that you loved a book when it was really quite harrowing, but it's so well done that you can't not admire the author and the writing, even though the subject matter is actually quite hard to take in places. That was book number 4. Book number 5, An Anthology of Modern Verse. Now, I'm going to have to start out with, this ain't too modern. So, it was first published more than 100 years ago in 1921. This edition is 1939, I think, because there's an inscription in it, 1940. Yeah, 1939 edition. It includes a lot of poets that are well known. And we've got people like Thomas Hardy, whose poetry I love actually, Robert Louis Stevenson, Rudyard Kipling, Walter de la Mare. There's a good selection of war poetry in here as well. We have Wilfred Owen, Rupert Brooke, Siegfried Sassoon, and a lot of those I'd read before. But then there were a number of poets in there that I'd never heard of and I really quite enjoyed. Um, Someone called Gordon Bottomley, J.C. Squire, Harold Munro, and Frances Cornfield. Frances, I'm presuming, is a woman because her name's spelt with an E and not an I. But it was interesting. There's also some G.K. Chesterton in here. And I struggle a bit with G.K. Chesterton. I don't know why, but the rest of them I thought were great. So I've done what Aaron does. Aaron Facer. I was watching a video of his the other day, and he said that when reading anthologies, he marks in the index authors that he would like to read more of. So I've done the same. And I'm looking forward to discovering more from authors that I don't really know that well. Right, book number 6. Well, I say book number 6. Anton Chekhov. It says the whole plays. I haven't read the whole plays. I have read the 3 one-act plays. They're all comedies. And I really enjoyed them. I like Chekhov anyway. Um, I have read The Bear, The Proposal, and A Jubilee. I enjoyed all of them. Each has a very small cast, but The Bear and The Proposal are hilarious. In The Bear, we have a widowed woman who has sat in her house for 7 months since her husband died, feeling sorry for herself and generally hiding herself away from the rest of the world. And at the beginning of the play, her husband's manservant comes in and tries to get her to enter the real world again. You've been grieving enough. You've done this for a long time. Really, you ought to get out and see the world again. There are neighbours out there. You're a young woman, etc., etc., etc. She says she's going to be faithful to her husband to the end of her days, and if she never leaves the house again, it doesn't bother her. And she's going to show how faithful a wife she is, even though he wasn't faithful to her. Then a neighbour turns up, demands to be let in. She says, no, 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 I'm still in mourning. I can't possibly see you now. It's the 7th-month anniversary of my husband's demise. He forces his way in and demands a lot of money, which he says her husband owed him, and out of respect, he hasn't been over to collect it for all this time, but he needs it now because he's got debts to pay and they are due tomorrow. And she says, well, I haven't got it and I can't get it and I won't be able to get it until the guy who manages my accounts comes the day after tomorrow. He throws a fit, yells and screams. He's quite a blustery guy. She says she can't possibly think about things like that on the anniversary of her husband's death. And he says, fine, but I'm not moving till I get my money. and promptly sits down and demands vodka. They argue and argue, and in the end he gets so agitated he challenges her to a duel and she accepts. And if you want to know what happens next, you're going to have to read it, but it's very funny and I enjoyed it a lot. There are only the three characters in it. He is the bear, but it's great, absolutely great. Not read it before, really thought it was fabulous. The proposal is on a similar line. Well, it's similar lines. There's a lot of arguing in these plays. We have a man and his neighbour. First man lives with his daughter. Neighbour, who is much younger, comes over to talk to said man and expresses his desire to propose to his daughter. Man, absolutely jubilant, thinks it's wonderful. Goes to talk to his daughter. His daughter comes in. He hasn't yet told her that their neighbour wishes to propose. She's very pleased to see her neighbour, and they sit down and they start chatting, and somehow they start talking about their land and how close it is together and how it borders in a certain place. And she says, "Hold up, that's not your field, that's ours." And he said, "No, it's not. It's mine." And this enormous row sets to about how his great grandmother lent it to the servants of her great grandfather for 40 years rent free, but the land's always been his and not given it back. And in the end, he storms out. And he's a bit of a hypochondriac as well. He thinks he's dying. He starts having palpitations and his legs won't work, but he still manages to storm out. Man then tells daughter that he'd actually come to propose. So she calls him back because she quite likes him, really, and she'd quite happily marry him. She calls him back and they agree to disagree. No, they don't. She agrees that the land belonged to his family and not hers. And then they start talking about more pleasant things like hunting and start arguing over the state of the dogs. And it's really funny. Really funny. Loved it. I've got a couple of more Chekhov plays to read. Oh, I think I've just got Three Sisters and the Cherry Orchard left. But I do like Chekhov. Finally, last up, because this is going on for a long time. Classic, Little Women. Reread. Haven't read it since. I probably haven't read it for about 45 years, you know. Maybe even longer than that. I'd read all of them at one point. But this came in a box of books that was donated to me, and I thought, I'm going to read a classic a month this year. And so I've read this. It was, I think I enjoyed it. I like the way I really like Jo. I've always liked Jo. I've always felt a certain affinity with Jo. It's not the sort of book I would usually read. Not anymore, anyway. But it's done well, I think. Obviously, with a number of films that have been made of it, then people like the story. I like the story. It's just a bit twee. But I do like the story. I think I preferred Jo's Boys. But no, I did like the story. I enjoyed rereading it. Whether I'll reread it again within the next 40 years, I don't know. How old would I be then? 98. Yeah, might be a bit late. Anyway, that's it for my reading week. I've had a good week. I am now 11 books away from finishing the Read What You Own challenge. I want this finished by the time I speak to you next Sunday. Next weekend is Gub August 2.5, where I can read trashy books all weekend. Trashy books don't tend to be that demanding. They don't tend to be that big either, actually. The ones I've got are quite short. So I am really hoping that the Read What You Own challenge, where I have pledged to read 100 books that I own before I buy any more, should be complete by next weekend. You have to wait and see. That's my plan anyway. Thank you for watching. That's it for this week. Let me know what you've been reading. Drop a line in the comments. Have a chat. That would be good. Like and subscribe. That would be lovely. And thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll see you again. I plan to do a video in the week this week because we're halfway through the first quarter of Historathon. So I'm going to do we're half the way through the first quarter of Historathon video. And then I shall see you again next weekend for my weekly wrap up, where I'm hoping I will be announcing the end of my Read What You Own challenge. Thank you and have a lovely week. I will speak to you again very soon. Bye for now.